Hoodhboy versus Darwin. There exists a large gap between the public and academic understanding of science. Science uses observations to create and test hypotheses and theories. God, by definition, is a being who is unseen. Therefore, any direct observation of God is impossible. In this manner, anyone making the claim that God is disproven by science is deeply mistaken. Philosopher of science Hugh Gauch explains to insist that science supports atheism is to get high marks for enthusiasm, but low marks for logic. Although popularizers like to peddle the idea that evolution somehow disproves God, it is actually an argument that Darwin would have disagreed with. He was never an atheist, and it would doubtlessly come as a surprise to him to find his theory being used as an argument against the existence of God. He wrote, "In my most extreme fluctuations, I have never been an atheist in the sense of denying the existence of a God. I think that generally, and more so as I grow older, but not always, that an agnostic would be the most correct description of my state of mind." When the first version of his book, The Origin of Species, was published, one reviewer wrote something Darwin took to heart. He noted it would be just as noble for God to have created all species individually or create one form of life which evolved into everything else. Darwin was so impressed by these words, he included them in the second edition of his book. Darwin continued to believe in God even after he had left Christianity and published his theory. Later in life, he became agnostic, but it wasn't, as some may speculate, his theory that led to his change in his beliefs. He wrote, "It seems to me absurd to doubt that a man may be an ardent theist and an evolutionist. The link between atheism and Darwin's theory is missing, and, despite Hoodhboy's efforts to implicitly popularize it, it is not one that can be academically justified. On the other hand, it is necessary to remain fair and point out the error that Imran Khan has made in also creating a link between the two." Nick Spencer's book, Darwin and God, contains a more nuanced discussion on the misconception of Darwin's atheistic views, in case anyone wishes to further explore the topic. Additionally, I had a discussion with Professor Jeremy Pritchard on this very issue of the misuse of Darwin by popular atheists, which I would recommend viewing, as Pritchard, although an atheist, acknowledges the matter. Now, the issue here is not just that Hoodhboy tries to subtly link Darwin with a theistic transgression. Again, to be fair to him, many others have also tried this, but that he explicitly makes claims about evolutionary theory which would frankly embarrass Darwin. After a thorough examination of the article, it may actually be safe to say that Hoodhboy has not read Darwin or the history of evolution in any detail. In fact, I am certain that he possesses nothing more than a pop understanding of the subject, which was made evident in the following statement from his article. "Thanks to biological science, the foundation of which was laid by Charles Darwin, the coronavirus will eventually turn out to be a deadly but controllable affair." Such a peasant view of Darwin could be expected of old Soviet materialistic literature, leaving one wondering, what on earth is he talking about? Darwin did not lay the foundations of biological science. To give evidence for this would be to belittle the intelligence of the reader. If Hoodhboy has his doubts on the matter, let him consult any high school science textbook. Even a Pakistani government-sanctioned one will do. Drugs, vaccines, and even the study of pathogens had been explored and utilized before Darwin. Furthermore, evolutionary biology is largely ignored in medicine, as the founder of evolutionary medicine, American physician Randolph Ness, points out. Evolutionary biology is an essential basic science for medicine, but few doctors and medical researchers are familiar with its most relevant principles. Most medical schools have geneticists who understand evolution, but few have even one evolutionary biologist to suggest other possible applications. The canyon between evolutionary biology and medicine is wide. The question is whether they offer each other enough to make bridge building worthwhile. On a side note, my dissertation, which is due to be published soon inshallah, actually argues in favor of evolutionary thinking and medicine. I think Ness is spot on, and for too long there has not been a sufficient integration. Hoodhboy again shows his misunderstanding of biological evolution by claiming that we could not deal with the evolution of viruses without Darwin's theory. As he says, without Darwinian selection, one can't even begin to understand microbial host interaction, the evolution of pathogens, or start developing drugs and vaccines. So go ahead and blame Darwin for inventing the notion that only the fittest survive. Here, he has simply confused Darwinism with evolution, falling for the fallacy of equivocation. Of course, it is possible to understand virus evolution without Darwin. There is a clear distinction between evolution and Darwin's theory of evolution, also known as Darwinism. On a public level, these terms are often thought to be interchangeable, so Hoodhboy should not be blamed. Academically, they are not. Evolution and Darwinism are distinct. As a matter of fact, the concept of non-Darwinian evolution also exists and has actually been the subject matter of academic books such as The Eclipse of Darwinism, Anti-Darwinian Evolution. So what is the difference between the two? Evolution as a general concept means biological change over time and has been known, written, documented, and theorized about for at least 3,000 years. References to biological change over time can be found in documents traced back to ancient civilizations ranging from ancient China to the ancient Brahmins in India and the ancient Greeks. But there is a difference between generally believing in biological change over time, which is an undeniable observation, and Darwin's theory of evolution. Half a century before the publication of The Origin of Species, a French biologist named Jean-Baptiste Lamarck published a comprehensive theory of evolution comprised of two distinct parts, a history of evolution and a mechanism of evolution. The history of evolution involved multiple endless origins of life with parallel lines of evolution taking place, and a mechanism of inheriting acquired characteristics. Darwin, in 1859, published another theory of evolution which was different to that of Lamarck's. Its history involved a total paradigm shift. Instead of multiple lines of parallel evolution, he highlighted the concept of only one origin, a tree of life and the mechanism of natural selection. A group of evolutionary biologists that challenge Darwinian theory have brought forward a project known as the Third Way of Evolution. The project comprises of biologists from North America and Europe and extends as far as China. These biologists stem from such prestigious universities as Oxford, Cambridge, Princeton, Harvard, and MIT. They explain their stances as the vast majority of people believe that there are only two alternative ways to explain the origins of biological diversity. One way is creationism, that depends upon intervention by a divine creator. That is clearly unscientific because it brings an arbitrary supernatural force into the evolution process. The commonly accepted alternative is neo-Darwinism, which is clearly a naturalistic science, but ignores much contemporary molecular evidence and invokes a set of unsupported assumptions about the accidental nature of hereditary variation. Neo-Darwinism ignores important rapid evolutionary processes such as symbiogenesis, horizontal DNA transfer, action of mobile DNA, and epigenetic modifications. Moreover, some neo-Darwinists have elevated natural selection into a unique creative force that solves all the difficult evolutionary problems without a real empirical basis. Many scientists today see the need for a deeper and more complete exploration of all aspects of the evolutionary process. These biologists clearly need guidance from Hoodhboy as they blasphemously think evolutionary theory can work without neo-Darwinism. Following is a brief exploration of three evolutionary alternatives to Darwinian evolution. Evolution by natural genetic engineering, ENGE. According to the standard Darwinian theory, randomness of mutations is the clay that natural selection molds into all sorts of novel species. Though the concept has been explored in numerous popular publications and documentaries, some evolutionary theorists claim there is a lack of evidence for random mutations making anything useful. One such biologist is James Shapiro, who challenges this central pillar of Darwinism by using contemporary research in mutations to make a completely new evolutionary paradigm. In Evolution, a view from the 21st century, Shapiro explains why ENGE may be a better model than Darwinian evolution. Neo-Lamarckian evolution. Although Lamarck was largely overlooked for a long time, biologists have recently begun to revisit his ideas and developed a revised theory under the name of Neo-Lamarckian evolution. Proponents of this theory argue that the inheritance of acquired characteristics is what drives evolutionary change, citing recent studies to support their view. Neo-Lamarckian evolution views the process in terms of rapid evolutionary transitions instead of slow incremental changes. Evolutionary biologist Eva Jablonka outlines this alternative view in her book, Transformations of Lamarckism. Mutation-Driven evolution. Mutationism also opposes the theory of small incremental steps, instead assuming evolution to be driven by large mutations. This mechanism challenges the idea of Darwinian gradualism and natural selection as the driving forces behind evolutionary change. Although mutationism was, for the most part, discarded several years ago, a rehashed version has been proposed recently by evolutionary biologist Masatoshi, who is a well-known, respected, and award-winning scientist. His work in the field of population genetics has been used widely, and his book, Mutation-Driven Evolution, shows how developments in molecular biology are challenging Darwinian predictions, further elaborating on how a new alternative may work. Allow me to clarify an important point. I did not mention these alternative evolutionary models to argue in their favor. Rather, my intention is to simply convey how it is possible and coherent to understand the evolution of viruses without Darwin. When considering Hoodhboy's understanding of the matter, one is forced to conclude that not only has he not read Darwin, but perhaps he has not read the works of his mentor, the Right Honourable Gentleman, Sir Richard Dawkins, as the latter explicitly states the possibility of evolutionary science continuing without Darwin. We must acknowledge the possibility that new facts may come to light, which will force our successors of the 21st century to abandon Darwinism or modify it beyond recognition. It gets worse. Hoodhboy not only misunderstands the difference between evolution and Darwinism, but he has also not managed to grasp what the concept of Darwinian selection really is. Darwin did not invent the idea of survival of the fittest. It had been known and documented since ancient times. Almost 2,000 years ago, Empedocles noted that nature generates a large variety of organisms randomly, of which only those who manage to provide for themselves and reproduce successfully persist. Throughout history, Thinkers have explored and developed the idea of the fittest surviving, and that in nature, organisms struggle for existence. Had Hoodhboy read The Origin of Species, he would have known that Darwin acknowledges those who theorized on the matter before him, and even explicitly mentions contemporaries such as Edward Blyth, who developed ideas on selection. What makes Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace, who Hoodhboy did not mention, unique is that they both derived independently at the conclusion that natural selection is not just a process of filtering, but a major creative force. To understand these nuances and other important historical evolutionary developments, I would recommend Stephen Jay Gould's excellent book, The Structure of Evolutionary Theory. Anyone who indulges in the careful examination of theories of evolution proposed throughout history would see it is evident that selection may very well be utilized under non-Darwinian evolutionary models, as well as applied to the study of viruses, despite claims to the contrary that Hoodhboy has so ardently made. Even if Darwin was the only person who came up with selection, and all the other developments which he credited to others, they still would not support Hoodhboy's claim that it is hypocritical for theists to utilize his theory to tackle viruses. In the same way, it is not hypocritical for atheists to rely on science, even though historically it was a theistic invention.